Okay, so on this video what we're going to do is go through the creation of a method called insert data so that we can use this to insert a record into the SQL database. Okay, so we're in the database helper and we want to create a public Boolean return type. So I'm going to type in Boolean insert data is the name. And then our parameter list will be string, and we're going to input a name there, and then that'll be it for that. Okay, what you guys will do is later you will add more parameters to this so that you can input the other fields in the from the contact. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is put a log message in there, and I've put some ones up in some of the other methods, so I'm just going to drop that down in there. I'm going to copy and paste that in, and so my contact app is where I'm at, and I'm in database helper, and I'm going to say, in this case here, I'm going to say that I am trying to insert data, so I'm inserting data here. And then what I want to do is I want to create an instance of my SQLite database. So my SQLite database, and I'm going to do an auto complete on that, and it's going to be called DB, and I'm going to say it's going to be this context dot get writable database. So I want the writable one. So I'm going to create that, and then after that, I want to create an instance of a content value, right? So I've talked about this in class, and this is a kind of like an array list that you can then add fields to and then input into the SQLite database. So when we use the insert method from within our SQLite database, we'll want to give it a content value. And again, it's like an array list, just a collection of items. All right, so I want to create one of those. So I'm going to just call this content values, and this is going to be just an instantiation of a new content values. And then what I want to do is I want to call one of the methods, and you can look this up in the Android content values API. I'm going to say content values.put, and that's going to put a bunch of different types of input that we can put in there, but I'm going to put strings in there. So I'm going to put the key for that is going to be my column name contact. So I'm going to just try to do this here. My column name contact is basically the name, and then I'm going to add to it the name that's the input parameter from my method parameter input list. So that's this guy here, right there, the name. Okay, now the next thing I want to do is I want to try to insert this into the database. So I'm going to say long and result, and it's going to be equal to my database, my SQLite database. And then what I want to do is I want to insert. So I'm going to start typing IN and then I auto complete to insert. And then what I want to do is I want to put in the table name, and then with that, there is another parameter called the null column hack. We don't have to worry about that, so we're just going to pass it a null reference, and then we're going to pass to it our content values record that we basically just created here by putting the contact name in there. Okay, this returns a number. Okay, it's not a Boolean. It returns a number, and the result will be some value. If that result happens to be -1, then it fails to do the insert. So I want to check that. If my result is equal to -1, then I've got a problem. And so what I want to say is I want to post something to my screen that basically says I've got an issue here, and I can say here that my contact insert failed. And then what I want to do is I want to return, and it's going to be a false because I'm returning a Boolean here. We're going to use this later in our in our main activity to bind. We're going to call this method when we want to insert a record, and that record would be based on the input from the user on the screen by typing in the contact information and then hitting a button. So we'll bind the button in a different method, and then that method then we'll call this insert data method. Okay, so we have another condition, the else condition, and what we do here is similar type stuff. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it in, and in this case here we actually passed because it's not -1. So if it's a number, it gives some code for it, and that would be true. So we return true for that. All right, so that's going to be it for that. I'm going to pause it here, and then we're going to start talking about the user input layout. Okay, so we are in the activity main XML file now, and we should see either text view of the file or the design view. Okay, so I want to get rid of this hello world message. I don't need it anymore, so I just click on it and hit delete. And then what I want to do is add a text view. So over on the left-hand side palette, if you go into text and then text view, you can drag a text view field onto the screen. Okay, so what I want to do there is I want to add that, and this is going to be basically the prompt for the user to enter the contact's name. So I'm going to put in there, if I double click on that, I get my attributes panel appearing up on the right hand side. And then what I want to do is I want to have the prompt there, and underneath the kind of the layout of it, you see something that says text view, and then under text you can set up the fields for prompting the user. So in this case I want to put name, so that's what I want to show up in there. And then under the text appearance, we can change the appearance that we want, if we want to change the font or the text size. So I'm going to change the text size there because it's a little bit small. Maybe make it like 18. And then you can change whatever else, the style and that kind of stuff that you want there. So then, yeah, so now we've got that. There's the prompt for that. And then what we want to do is add an input line, so for the user to be able to input the name of the contact. So that is under text, and then we bring in a plain text field, and so we bring that over here. Okay, so that's over there, and you just kind of line it up next to it. And then what we want to do is we want to put some information on, again, in our attributes on that. So when I double click on that, the ID is called edit text, and I want that to be edit text, and I want to be able to reference this inside the code. So I'm going to say that it's going to be called edit text underscore name, and then so that's going to be my ID, and then the input type is the text person name, and then under text view I don't want anything to show up in there because I've already got my text field here, so I just make that nothing. And if I go back here, then again you can do some changes on it with size and all that stuff when you are inputting your data to that. All right, so now what this does is it will create, if I look in my text, it's going to create the text view and the edit field for that we just put in there. If I click on it, it sort of highlights it over. If I click on the text edit, it highlights that, so I know which one goes to which, and it automatically puts in the XML code for you. Okay, so there is there's a warning or an error in this thing. It's basically a warning. It's not going to give you a problem. It's not going to, have a code error thing that will cause it to not compile. It's basically, though, telling you that at design time, this thing is going to run when you run it, it's going to jump to 0, 0, the 0, 0 position in the screen. So basically, this thing will go up to 0, 0, and this thing will go up to 0, 0, unless you constrain it. So you want to do that those constraints. So if I go back to my design, what I want to do is I want to anchor this thing to the top and the side at least, and maybe the bottom too. So what I do is I grab and I click on the button, and I get this little arrow, and it will kind of lock it to the top. And so then I can reposition where I want that, and then I can take another arrow and grab it to the side, and it locks it there, and then I pull it apart. That's probably enough to put the name on there, but we can put it on the bottom as well. And you grab the other one, and I'm going to try to line that up, and then with its setting as well, I'm going to do that to move it down, and then I'm going to move this one up against the name so that it's referenced to the name, and I'm going to try to see if I can get that arrow to be straight. But you get the idea. You want to get this thing as straight as you can, so it just looks good. So you set up your arrows so that they lock in, and that way you're going to be some position relative to the top and the side. That way you'll get it locked in when it actually displays after you download it. Okay, so now we can see that we should be okay. I don't know what this error is here. Missing constraints attribute, and I think that's okay. But we don't have the red underline anymore, so we should be able to now run this thing. Okay, I'm going to pause here because we're going to jump to a different section. Okay, so I'm back in the design panel, and the last thing we want to do for our layout is to add a button. So we want at least one button, and you guys will add more. And I want to do that to add data to it. So I'm going to go to button, and I'm just going to grab a button. So there's different types of buttons. So I'm going to grab this button here, and then I'm going to double click it so that I get my attributes on it. And this one I'm going to I need to change the ID on it.